Welcome to the next lecture. This lecture is very important because we are going to create the most important table of our database, which is events table. So if we look at the events page, we can see it here on the create event that we have few fields like event name, starting time of the event, ending time of the event, select date, which means the date of the event. Then we do have the category, which we have created the categories table, location for the locations table, choose photo for the attachments table, and then we have a field for the description. So if we note the available columns of the events table, we can see that we do need ID and title of the events. That's obvious. Then we have one thing which is start time. So if we write it as start time and end time as end time, but I am not going to write the date over here. The reason behind this, because what I will do, I will attach this date with start time and this date also with the end time. The reason is when I am querying the events or I am searching the events by dates or maybe showing the events which are coming first in the list, then I need to get help from the start time and end time. If I save that separately, that will be little difficult to query, but because the date is separately saved and time is separately saved. But in the queries I will show you what does that mean. The category obviously is the category ID, which will be used as an event attachment category. Then we have the locations table. For the locations table, if we remember, we have created something as called the object ID and object type. So this will be saved inside the locations table, so we do not need to save in the events table. Then the attachments is also a separate table, and we know that the attachments will be stored totally separately from the events, so we will not create that column as well. We can have the description, then we can have obviously created at and updated at. There is one thing very important which you need to remember always is the user ID, because the person who has created this event, so only he will be able to edit or delete that event in the future. So if we move forward and we try to create this table inside the database, we will go to the event database, and inside the name of the table under create table option we will put the events. And how many columns do we need over here? I think it's 9. So if we put the 9 columns over here and head back to the architecture of this table, we will put the informations like ID, user ID, title of the event, start time, end time of the event, category ID. Then we need to have the description, the details of the event, in other words, created at and updated at. ID is always auto increment. We have already seen that at many places. User ID is also integer, so if we don't give the length, it will be 11 automatically. Title of that event can be up to 500 characters, so we put that way. And we will save the date and time both inside the start time and end time as well. So let's put that column type as the date and time. In the category ID, obviously there will be ID. In the description we can put the text, because we don't know how long it will be the description. And for the created at and updated at, we can save the date and time and timestamps accordingly. And for the updated at, as you all know, that we can put that as attribute of on update current. So if we look around our table once more, that okay, we have ID, user ID, title, start time, end time, category ID description created at and updated at all, and also our ID is auto incremented. If I put save, invalid default value for updated at, so we need to put the default values for the timestamp. If I do click save, and then we will see it will create a table of the events inside the database, which has columns of these according to our these requirements. So if we try to create an event, so for example, if I put the user ID, so first we need to look in the users tables, who are the users in the table. So Tosif is as ID 1 and John as 2. So if I say okay, user 1 is creating a table, and the event, and the event is about, for example, advanced web development training, then I can choose the start date and time. For example, it's starting on Monday, just an example date at 10 a.m. and then it will end at, if I would say, 11 a.m. Okay, so this is how date and times are saved inside it. Category ID, so if you remember, in the categories table we need to have few categories. We have education, so this is an education event as well, and we have the category ID 3 over here. So what we will do, we will put the 3 as here, so because this is the education, so this will cover, for example, we will say okay, this will cover web3 and blockchain, just an example. Okay, development inside the advanced development event. Created and updated we can leave as it is, and then if I click go, then we can see okay, it has created an event inside our events table. And if I just copy the query and paste it here to explain it further later maybe, and then if we go to the events table, we can see over here that the events table has one record, which is we just saved it. But we have few questions over here, like for example, we do not have saved the location of the event table, we have not saved the attachment of the events. So for example, this event has a location of ABC. So then what we will do is, we have now the event ID over here. The reason we do not store the location and attachments before creating the event, for example, if we were creating an event and there was another event at the same time created by the user, so we will not allow to create another event. So the reason is, so if we first create the attachment, first create the location, and then come to create the event, and there was an error in creating the event, that means that location and that attachment is useless. So that will just be burden on the memory, and even we can't create it because we do not have the event ID. So right now we have the event ID as 1, then only we can save the data of inside the other columns of the table. So for example, if we talk about the location first, so because it's coming in the location over here, so what we will do, we will go inside the insert, and here we will put the user ID. We are using the user ID as Tosif, which is 1, and then object ID is 1 because that is event, and we will say the address, for example, DHA Lahore, and then the city, for example, Lahore, and country Pakistan, latitude and longitude exemplary, if I just put it that way. And because now the important thing is the object ID, we are putting here the object ID, right? Because our event ID is 1, so our object ID should be also 1, which means this will be saved as against this event. So now the location is also saved. So if we go back and look at the locations, we will be able to see, yes, there is a location saved against the object id 1. Actually there are two locations with object id 1, because this one we created previously when we were learning, so I will just delete it, so it won't create any confusion. So we can see over here the object id is 1, which means the event id is 1. So this is how we create the location. Now let's come to the attachment. So the photo which will be uploaded here, it will be saved inside the attachments table. So how it will be saved? So the user actually who is creating this event will id be here. Then we will say okay, the object id is also 1 because our event id is 1. This is not a post, right? This is an event, and the image will be here. So this image will come from the API, and I will explain you in once we were developing the APIs how we will give it the name. So for example, just for example, now we just put it as event1 image, and then we need to put the type because we are saving it as an image and we are getting the image from the API. We just put it as an image, and if we click go, then it will say okay, it's inserted an attachment inside the attachments table against a specific event which we just put as an object id. So if I go back in the attachments table, I can see yes, there is one record added against the event for the attachments table. So actually why we are putting these things? Because to just differentiate and to make the normalization, make sure that is used and our DB is not repeating the things. That's why we are saving these things separately as a separation of concerns. So if we look at here, for example, if we go to the event, any detail of an event, so we can see here, yes, it's a category, it's a location of that event, then we have a date over here, then we have the start and end time of that event, then we have an image on the back side, then we have post as well, which we will create once we will move forward in the lectures. So if we try to get the event, for example, we try to get this event, what we will do, select static from the event, or do it fresh. For example, select static from the events where id equals 1. Okay, if I go and if I try to search this, it will give us a 1 record here, right? This is a 1 event. Then if I want to get this event location as well, so what I will do is I need to put the joins. For example, I will say okay, join which table? Locations table, where locations dot object id equals events dot id. So this is means that the locations object id should be events dot id equals. That means we are getting the location of this specific event. Okay, and then we also need to check one more thing, that the locations and the locations dot, you remember there is one column which is called object type, this should be equals event as well. So because we are getting the event location, then we must need to make sure that we are getting the location of that specific event, and that object is also an event. If we do not put that, so then there is a possibility that there is an other thing, maybe a post location or a user location, which may create a problem accordingly. So that's why we put that on object type, that it should be an event. So if we click go, then it's saying that there is a column id in where class is ambiguous, which means that the column of id is same inside the event and inside the locations table. So what we can do is we can say as event as e, and we can say locations as loc. So here, for example, for now we can say okay, we need event id, we need, for example, for now event dot title, and from the location we need, for example, for now just let's get address, but you can get anything from out of that. So then you need to update this as well, because now we are using the short names for our tables, and also here we are getting the ID of the event and one more option here. So e is e.id from here. So now let's try out. Okay, it's showing us the ID, title and address. So what happens actually is it's showing us it join, and it selected the data from the both tables. Actually, let's try it out and find along with the locations. Now let's try out and find the attachment as well. So what we will do, select e.id, event ID, e.title, location.address for now. Then we will have a new table for the attachment. So we will say okay, from if we say attachment is ATT, so attachment dot URL for example now, and then from which table we are getting this data, events as E, and then we will put a join to join these tables. First we will try out the address table, so which is actually locations as LOC on LOC dot object ID equals event dot ID and event LOC means locations dot object type should be always event. Also now we are joining one more table which is events as ATT on, and we will say okay, from the ATT dot object ID should be equals event dot ID and attachments dot object type should also be event, where event dot ID equals 1. So we are trying to get data of one event table. So if I click go, where it is, okay, it's showing us the data over here. Not sure why it's showing here and there, but you can see over here that the ID, address, title and URL. So in this lecture you have only not learned about the event table, but you have also learned the join as well, that we are getting data from multiple tables. Then if you remember, we pasted a query over here. That was actually the first one, that which explains us about the insertion of the event. So I hope you know the insertions already, so you can understand that easily. So if I just go through it quickly, then it means insert into events and then the columns where the events will be saved, and then the values of all the event details. So this is how you create an event, and this is how you get the data of an event